Welcome to Community Crossfire, another point of view. I'm your host, Norman Oliver, with my co-host, Jermaine. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, we have exciting shows. We cut no corners. We talk about all issues. And guess what? This is another good show. We have the Chief of Police. We have Senator Brown. And we have my good friend, Butch, Ingram, who's the principal. So we're giving you police, we're giving you politics, and we're giving you education because we're diverse like that. And before I begin my show, I always kind of start out with a little conversation. And the conversation today is Tuesday is the filing deadline, so we're going to have a lot of politicians, a lot of people who want to run for office, from city government to county government to state reps to senators. So it's going to get really crazy and live. It's going to get crazy and live on this show because we're going to be inviting them. Jermaine, I was going to tell you, man, if you get a chance, I've read Al Plant, who used to run this program, had me read Willie Lynch about 30 years ago. And it's happened today. Willie Lynch talked about in the 1700s how he taught his slaves to control blacks on blacks, you know, dark-skinned blacks against light-skinned blacks. People who have upper echelon jobs compared to the janitors, light-skinned women, dark-skinned women. I mean, it's really fascinating because sometimes I see that in our community because we have a lot of Willie Lynches in our community. And I'm sure Ivan Thomas even had to deal with that. Ivan had to deal with Willie Lynches when he was trying to get this program, DETV. So he's not immune to that. See, some things people are afraid to talk about, I'm not. So in saying that, because, and I don't care, right? Hey, Chief, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Norman.
I know you like, man. How did I get in the middle of a bat, right? Hey, Chief, let's get right into it, man. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how did you get to Wilmington? Because we have a short segment, so we got to kind of rush things through. But how did you get here?
Well, I'm second-generation police officer. Born in my early life and raised in the Bronx. My father was a Bronx homicide detective. So I knew early on what I wanted to be in life. So I'm kind of lucky to know that that's part of what I wanted to be, my passion. And I started out in policing in 1984 in the Bronx. Spent over 23 years in the NYPD, some time in the private sector, and then I was second in charge at the Chicago Police Department from 2011 to 2015, back in the private sector. And then there was a national search for the first time for the chief of police and in the city of Wilmington. And I got a call from the search firm. They asked me, would I be interested? I knew a little bit about the city. I thought some of the things that we were able to do in other places and had some successes. I knew we can start to see some of those things with community engagement in the city of Wilmington. And it's in my blood, it's in my passion. I'm here out of want, not out of need, because I really want to make a difference and connect with a community. 35 national candidates and local candidates, and threw my hat in the ring, and I was the last one standing, and Mayor Buzicki appointed me to be Wilmington Police Chief, first outside chief in the history of this department.
Wow, good for you.
3 years ago.
So you like you said, you've come from a family of police. You've been a police officer and been involved with policing pretty much all your life. You've had to see a big change from when you first got in to today. Could you explain some of that?
Well, coming in and being trained in 1984, over 3 decades ago, the transformation and the evolving of policing and the type of training and what we deal with has changed immensely in over 3 decades. And we evolve in policing, and unfortunately, sometimes when there's mistakes, there are times now we can really take a good look at, are we doing things right? How do we need to improve? So we're always looking to improve. I've been part of that process, and then unfortunately you start seeing that horrific incident that happened out in Minneapolis several weeks ago, where there was a murder of a black man by a white police officer, and 3 other officers who had a duty to intervene that didn't, and they're all being charged accordingly. And it's affecting how we look at policing, and if there's ways to do things better and build trust, I'm all for it.
Jermaine?
Yes, Chief Tracy, welcome to the show. You just said how you've seen police training evolve over the years. Can you speak about how you can implement new training techniques into the Wilmington Police Department? And I also heard you speak about sensitivity and bias training. Can you give us a little insight on that also, please?
Yeah, of course, coming in with a fresh set of eyes into an organization that hasn't had an outsider in the history of the department, You know, I've had a chance to look at best practices because not only was I in New York, I was in Chicago, and I was part of the transformation of the NYPD, and then transformation of things in Chicago. That gave me the experience to take a look at and take a critical look on what we're doing. When I first came into the Wilmington Police Department, I can have the greatest strategies in the world, but you know what? We're not going to have any long-term success if we don't have community engagement, and then we're working with the community. And with the 49 civic associations, I made sure that my officers stayed in the same area every time that they work, and making sure that when they're in the same area, they're connecting with the community, they're going to the meetings, they're making sure they start to build that trust, build those relationships. On top of that, I took a look at the training that we do. Our use of force policies, the first thing that I was asked when I came in was to take a look at that. So I implemented some best practices. It was a good policy, but it needed to be updated. De-escalation training, duty to intervene. There's so many things when you have policy. The one thing you got to make sure you do, you can have the greatest policy in the world, but a lot of departments are not following the policy because they train to culture and not the best practices. So my job is to make sure I look at things critically. I make sure I change things, and we have since I've been here. But that should be a natural progression that I should be reviewing them, and a chief should be looking at things that are happening across the United States and looking for those opportunities to improve. And there is some community input, and I'm going to continue to do that.
You know, Jermaine was in a meeting with me when we sat and met with Dave Weiss, the Attorney General, and Kathy Jennings, and we had all of our congressional delegation there, Chief, and you sat in that meeting. I think that one thing that struck me is that really, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that really local police jurisdictions have control over policing, say body cams or the Police Bill of Rights, but there's another entity that you guys have to go to for approval. Because I even heard a guy down there from the state said, no, we're not doing anything. Could you address that? Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, I remember that clearly. And, you know, do we want to keep it localized, or do we want to make decisions on a state level that might affect areas that the argument or the statement that was being made is that we kind of want to keep state politics and national politics out of our localized politics. I think there's a happy medium. We're actually, we have to, by law, there's a law enforcement bill of rights that the state legislators have put in place, that's been in place for a few decades now. And I think that's a critical look at what that's about, what the protections are, and is there a need to change, and should we be changing things? But those are the things that should be discussed on how we should change those things. And we're going to be meeting with the task force, especially with the Black Caucus of state legislators, to really go over these things and see, let's make sure that when we're making these things, making the change, they're for the greater good. And
so Chief, I want everyone who's watching to be clear on this. So the local Wilmington Police or Georgetown Police or Smyrna Police, you have a state Bill of Rights, right, or organization that supersedes you guys. It's almost like federal. So you guys have power, but if these guys say no, the buck stops there.
Correct. And
wow, that's deep.
The state law supersedes local law, and as a sworn law enforcement officer, there are some laws on the books that, you know, personally I might not agree with. I don't want to get into that, but I did take a sworn oath to make sure that I'm obeying the law and I'm enforcing the law. So there's some things that people are, why aren't you doing this differently, Chief? And I'm saying, well, it's actually a law on the books, and I don't make the laws.
Wow. I hope people are watching and understand that questioning. You're watching Community Crossfire. Jermaine, you could chime in.
Yes, Chief. We had Councilwoman on a few episodes back, and they announced that Wilmington has the budget to get body cameras. I would like to have your take on, would you want your officers to have body cameras? And if so, when should citizens expect their police officers to have body cameras?
Yeah, Jermaine, this has been an issue that's been going on in Wilmington, and especially since I've come here. There was a pilot program prior to my arrival as the chief of police, and then afterwards it became a conversation last year. And I've been on record at the Public Safety Committee hearings that I'm for it. Our officers are for it. I know the union's for it. I know the public wants it. But sometimes when you have these type of budgets, it comes down to economics and where we can fit this in without raising taxes. And, I think everything's brought to the forefront. And even recent events, I've looked for federal grants to try to supplement our budget to make sure we can get them. We weren't successful last year, but we put in again this year for the grant. And I think really the mayor and some council people have really dedicated themselves that whether we get the grant or not, to help us with this, we're going to move forward this year getting these body cameras. So we're probably going to wait till about September, October when we hear about this grant to see if we get it. And then whether we get it or not, we're going to find the money or supplement with some of the grant money to get this going. I believe in it. I think it's good. I think it's going to help everybody with transparency. And I don't think anybody's against it. I think we're all on it. And the police officers want it as well, as this chief of police.
Hey, Chief, I thought shootings and killings and things went down when you first came in, and it looked like it spiked again, then it went down, but it seemed like it's rising again. What do you think attributes to that, and what's your plan, and what's going on now?
Yeah, well, my first year in 2017, this place was, we were having a large amount of shootings and murders, more than they've seen in any other year. And then a lot of the strategies that we put in place, we were able to now bring dramatic and historic reductions in 2018, continued somewhat on the pace in 2019, and then here we are in 2020, unprecedented of what we're dealing with. We got a global pandemic that affects us nationally and locally. Kids not going to school, we thought it was going to take 2 weeks. People not going to work, staying at home, essential workers, non-essential workers. And these are things that even affect my offices as far as not even just at work, but actually going home because, COVID-19's not just at work, but it's in the community. A lot of anxiety, a lot of stress on how to deal with these things. And nationally, you might see some crimes going down, but what we found out, we're seeing more calls for service for shooting incidents, shots fired. So our officers are just as busy, if not busier. And then you have like almost a perfect storm of people trying to come out, warm weather. People want to get out of their houses. And then we have that incident we talked about in Minneapolis. You got high emotion. You have rightful outrage, and then some. And then policing is the focus of it. And we have a lot of things that have been going on. We've had a lot of protests. We've had some criminal activity during the protests, but mostly peaceful, and I'm very proud of the community and how our officers handle things in Wilmington. But a lot of these things, they stretch policing very, very thin because we have to handle all these things. And then the increase with fireworks. Nationally, some cities are up 5,000 to 6,000% calls for service all through the month of June. It isn't just around July 4th. So that actually takes a lot of the time for our policing, where sometimes the policing that we've been doing, what we've been successful, we become more reactionary, where we can be proactive, walking those footposts. And I think one of the biggest things is that working with the community, going to those community meetings, the best thing is person-to-person type of exposure to each other. And a lot of the communities, they don't have the technological advances to do Zoom. So we're not getting that type of engagement. We're talking to the community leaders, but not the community overall. Our officers are trying to get out of the cars more and more. Now the calls for service from fireworks are going down. So I think that's a big thing that I'm hoping we can get back to that, and then get back to the strategy. We haven't abandoned them, but all these things work within the strategy and community engagement, Norman.
It's a little crazy. Jermaine, did you want to ask a question before the Chief leaves?
Yes, Chief. I've heard from multiple residents that they don't know who their patrolmen or patrol women are in the area. That's a very important part and resident to police communication. Can you give us a little insight on what you and the Wilmington Police Department are doing to crack down on patrolmen knowing who they're going to see, maybe at a certain residence, and residents knowing the patrolmen that would show up if they were to call the police department?
You know, Jermaine, that's a great question, and that was one of the biggest things I told you when I came in is about the strategies, but the number one strategy is community engagement. Community engagement, and how do you get that? You got to keep the same officers in the same area working in that area every time they work. When I first came here, we were moving our offices from one day they'd be in Browntown, the next day they'd be in the Highlands, and the next time they'd be in Riverside. You can't do that because then the officers are not getting to know the community. So my number one strategy is keeping the same officers in the same area, going to community meetings, making sure that they're at these community meetings, not 10 officers that are community policing officers, but 315 police officers that are community police officers, beginning with myself. And that takes time. And then they get to know the community, they listen to the complaints, they understand what the issues are, and we put them in the areas the community is asking us, and where I'm asking them to do with an intelligence-led strategy to prevent any further violence from happening. That's going to take time. I've had 3 academy classes come through. So I'm keeping them in the same areas, but you might be seeing some new police officers because as we continue to get academy classes, there's retirements, but it's not happening because I'm moving people all over the city. If you see my 3 sector captains, they've all been in place for 3 years, except for one I just moved. But that person knows the community really well. He's going to bring himself up to speed. And that's a really important question. But I appeal to the community. When we get back to these community meetings, go to your civic associations. There's 49 in the city. You have 1 in each area of the city. Go to those meetings, meet my police officers. They'll speak with you. And then I'm getting my officers out of the cars in between calls for service so they can walk that footpost, approach them, say hello, talk with them. They'll speak with you. And that's the way it really should be done.
That's
but
good stuff.
It's going to take time.
That's good stuff. Chief, and closing, one quick last question, and that was a great segue into this final question. You were talking about classes and recruiting. What are you doing as it relates to minority recruiting as it, to come on the police force? I know that some council members had some problems with not enough blacks or minorities on the police force. How do you address that?
Norman, first you have to appeal to what type of policing that you're doing. I reach out to all the groups. We've been at the historically black colleges and universities. We've been
Good stuff.
We've been HBCUs. We've been everywhere trying to recruit. We're trying to get into the schools. We make sure that how we do our advertisements, and we've been improving on that. But to change a police force all the way that it's going to be reflective to the community, where we're almost 60% African American in this city, it takes time. I'm happy to say, I'd like it to get better, that the last couple of classes we've had probably 35 to 36% representation of minorities in our academy classes, and only 10% of the minorities are retiring. So it's starting to shift, and this last application period that I looked at, more than half the applicants are African Americans and Hispanics. So that'll draw down to where, when we start to have the group and put a new academy class in, hopefully it'll start getting us to where our office is more representative of the community. But I also need help from everyone to help us recruit. And we've been doing a lot of things that one of the councilwomen just complimented us at the public safety hearing meeting on Monday, saying thank you very much for the efforts. I gave quarterly reports, and they were very happy with the results and what we're trying to do to recruit minorities and women on the police department.
Good stuff. Thank you, Chief. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Community Crossfire, Another Point of View. I want to thank our Chief Tracy for coming on. Our next guest will be Darius Brown, our state senator, who's the chair of the Black Caucus, I think, and I think he's doing an incredible job, followed by Butch Ingram, who's the principal at Glasgow, another good friend. So we're going to take a break. Thank you, Chief, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Community Crossfire, Another Point of View. I'm your host, Norman with Jermaine, and wow, I am so honored to have my friend and brother and colleague, Darius Brown, who is doing an incredible job his first year down legislator. But before I begin, Ivan Thomas just asked me to wear a collar shirt. I just saw this guy on 8 commercials without a collar shirt. So how the hell are he going to tell me what to wear if he don't wear it? Is he crazy? Oh, Norman Oliver, put on a collar shirt. Ivan, let me see that commercial again. You got on a T-shirt. I never see you in a collar shirt. Wow, what a country. See what happens when people start getting big, Darius? They say like, oh, man, I'm a big time, I'm Big Ivan. Look, man, you wear a collar shirt and a tie. Shit, just tell me wear a suit next time. Welcome to the show. Hey, Darius, how you doing, man?
How you doing, Storm? It's always good to be with you. Haven't been with you on 28 in quite a while. I want to thank you for your support over the years, your encouragement. Every campaign, whether it was a win or a loss, you were there. So I appreciate it. and look forward to tonight's
Hey, Darius, I
conversation.
want to ask you this. You know, we've never had this conversation before, and I think I've read a little bit about in the news journal. How does it feel to follow in the footsteps of first African male to come in after Herman Holloway Sr., who was a giant?
Right.
And even Margaret Henry, who served in legislature for 20, 30 years.
Right.
And then you come in as a young guy. And especially Herman. I think I want to focus on that because he was a black male.
Right.
And the first black male to serve the state senate. And a black male having served the state senate probably for 30 years.
Right.
How do you...
Yeah, it is a blessing and a burden. I mean, you know about it in public life and all the things you've done as well. Not only do I go to Dover to represent the 2nd Senatorial District that I've been elected to represent, but also everything I do, it's literally representing the entire African American race in the state. You know, and so that it's a blessing and a burden. The work.
Did you see that? Did you realize that when you?
I understood it in my head, but it's completely different when you got to walk it out and live it out every day.
Wow.
You know, like I seen Senator Henry, Margaret Rose Henry, the first female African American to serve in the Delaware State Senate. I seen her work, you know, admired her work through 24 years, and actually being able to now having to sit in that seat, like again. It's the weight of the responsibility of being down there, and I can't imagine what that was like, you know, in the mid '60s for the senator, you know, Herman Holloway Sr.
I remember going down there in the '80s as a student at Dover State. And I thought I was going to a Klan rally in the House of Representatives, Senate down there. You didn't say that. I said it.
Let me say that Delaware General Assembly is diverse thoughts of ethnicities of people. And
well, you said that, not me.
What I can say is that, you know, we've made history in 2018. We have 8 African Americans now in the state legislature. I believe.
Out of how many?
Out of
62?
62, which is the most in history. I believe the most that was ever in Dover at one time was 5, and that's because you remember Dr. Blakey was a Republican was a state rep from downstate.
Good Kappa man, by the way.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate. You know, y'all got caught up. Y'all got caught up in a snowstorm. If history records it correctly. So you know, but you know, all that stuff's
that's
important.
Deep, though.
Man.
It's deep.
Yeah. So you know, and my thing is my appreciation of that history. And even the history that people don't know of Norman Oliver and how other people have been in elected office because you have not always sought to take every opportunity that was offered to you, and you opened the way for other people.
I appreciate that, Darius.
So I won't go in depth to that history, but that is a history where you know people now get things named after them because you said no, and people are governors now because you say no.
Thank you. You have a question, man?
Yes, First Senator Brown, I just want to say congratulations on becoming the first African American senator in the state of Delaware. Second, excuse me. Okay, in the 2nd district too.
Yeah.
I think your background is very interesting. Can you give the people a little insight on how you became a senator in the state of Delaware?
So let me go even further back because as you will learn in life, as Storm knows in life, that oftentimes people look at your successes and don't realize you've had many more failures than successes.
Right.
I've had many more public and private failures than I've ever had the successes that people celebrate. And so I'm just an East Side kid that grew up in Bethel Villa across from the police station. Okay. And in my professional life, people have always thought I was from some other part of Newcastle County that was more upwardly mobile. But I grew up in a family that feared God and raised us in the admonition of the Lord. That taught us about community service and a sense of family. And so I spent most of my days as a child outside of school at People's Settlement Community Center doing every activity and playing on every athletic team they had, and then spent my time at church with my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents where they taught me about service. Every Saturday, we were feeding the hungry, you know, clothing the naked, giving out stuff. So my sense of service didn't come because like I'm a 3rd-generation politician. It literally came from my service to the church. And then one of my best friends in life is Chris Stevens. His mother, Paula Stevens, when we were kids, ran Eastside Citizens, which was a local social service nonprofit on the east side of Wilmington. So her and Miss Stafford, the late Miss Stafford, Francis
Wow.
Stafford.
Wow.
They had me on the east side doing all types of community service projects.
Okay. You're going
as a
back,
kid.
man.
So that's
good.
That's my sense of giving back, and that's why I'm here, and that's how I got here.
Okay.
Hey, Darius, let's talk about legislation a little bit.
Okay.
Do you have any signature legislation or bills, something that you want to talk about that you, during this session that you're very proud of, something that you're saying, this is what I brought back to our community?
A lot of things I'm proud of. I've learned to not account it as an accomplishment of mine, but a collective accomplishment of others in the General Assembly. Again, there's 21 members in the Senate. There's 41 members in the House of Representatives. No idea that I have can become law without a majority of the 21 senators saying yes and a majority of the 41 members of the House of Representatives saying yes and voting on the bill. So my first bill was an adult expungement bill, which is different from other criminal justice reform bills that just seal people's record. Now in Delaware, individuals can apply to have their record erased. And is there a difference between a sealing and an expungement? Expungement literally erases your record. Sealing just, seals it from public view for certain entities and individuals. And so with that bill, it is literally the most comprehensive and exhaustive criminal justice expungement bill in the entire country. But it would not have gotten done if I wasn't in the Senate and got literally every senator to vote for that bill. All 9 Republicans voted to pass that bill, which is unprecedented. And then in the House, of the 41 members of the House of Representatives, I think 5 voted no, and the majority said yes. So yes, it's a bill I sponsored. We worked hard on it, but I like to celebrate the collective because none of us can accomplish any of those things by ourselves.
Jermaine?
Yes, Senator. For the people that don't know, can you let us know what committees you are a part of, and can you also give us some insight on your agenda, not only what you did this year, but what you would do for the upcoming year?
Yeah. So this is my first term, 2 years in, freshman state senator, and I chair the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm the vice chair of the Corrections and Public Safety Committee. I serve as a member of the Bond Bill Committee or the Infrastructure Committee, and then I chair the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus. On the judiciary side, you heard we talked a little bit about the expungement bill already, but also working with Governor Carney, and I want to give the governor a shout out. He appointed for the first time in Delaware's history an African American as a state Supreme Court justice, Tamika Montgomery Reeves, and so he should be praised and celebrated, thanked for his commitment to the legal profession, but also particularly to make sure that African Americans are a part of the highest judicial body in our state. And then recently, he also appointed African American women to the Newcastle County Court of Common Pleas and the Sussex County Court of Common Pleas. The Sussex appointment is important because Ray is the first African American female to be on any bench as a judge, not a commissioner, as a judge below the canal in the history of the state, and that just happened a month ago.
Wow.
And then Monica is the first African American woman to serve in Newcastle County in the Court of Common Pleas. So we've been making a lot of progress, and people will say, Darius, you did it. Again, my approach to it is it's been a collective voice of the members of the Black Caucus, of members of the Delaware State Senate, the leadership of the Senate, and of the House supporting the ideas and things that I want to move forward. And we've been able to accomplish them, over the last 18 months.
Hey, Darius, I talked to Chief Tracy just now, and I was talking to him about the meeting that you also were in with U.S. Attorney Weiss and Attorney General and our congressional delegation and some of the marchers or organizers, I would say organizers. And you brought up something interesting. You said that the Black Caucus and the General Assembly agreed to 6 out of their 8 demands. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so after the marching and the tragic deaths of so many different people, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and others, what we did was the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus announced 8 priorities as the Justice for All legislative agenda. And this happened in mid-June, where the General Assembly is scheduled to adjourn on June 30th. So in a matter of 2 weeks, and I got to emphasize that, in a matter of 2 weeks, we announced 8 legislative priorities, and we accomplished the majority of them through either legislation or executive order by
That's
the governor,
incredible.
or epilogue language in the Joint Finance Committee in the Grant and Aid budget, so that we could create an African American task force and also a law enforcement task force to address many of the issues that bubbled up from the community that they wanted us to work toward.
That's incredible. Thank you, Jermaine.
Yes, Senator. I would like to shift gears a little bit. You are the senator for the 2nd District in Delaware, which includes east side of Wilmington, Edgemore, and Newcastle. What have been some of the concerns that you have heard from your residents, and what are you doing to address those concerns that they have?
So the 2nd District is a vast district that runs along the 495 corridor, literally from Edgemore to Old Newcastle. And it takes in historic neighborhoods like Buttonwood, the old Buttonwood School. I have a small piece of the east side. And again, as a kid that grew up on the east side, it hurts my heart to only have a small piece of the east side. But all of North Side, Northeast, Riverside, South Bridge, and then going out Route 9 all the way from South Bridge to portions of Old Newcastle are in the 2nd Senatorial District. And the things that constituents talk to me about the most is really about jobs, education, particularly right now around COVID. And so there's a lot of work that the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus has done to ensure that there's testing sites in African American communities over the last 3 months as we are going through this global pandemic. And for me, conversations I have with friends is, please understand, when I ran for office and asked for your vote to represent you in the Delaware State Senate, addressing a global pandemic was not on my campaign. Okay? But we've been able to work to address those type of things, and so I'm very proud of how we've been able to deliver for the 2nd Senatorial District and marginalized communities up and down the state.
Yes,
Right.
Senator. For people that, I just have a little follow-up question. For people that do have concerns, they may not know where to contact you in your office. Can you give that out, please, right now?
You can always contact me by email, darius.brown@delaware.gov, darius.brown@delaware.gov. It's much easier for me to get it as an email, and then I can address and remedy your issues.
Okay.
We've been helping a lot of people in the last 3 months also around unemployment insurance. So I want to give a shout out to Secretary Saran Cade and the Department of Labor for their help, as we've been doing a lot of constituent services in that regard, and how they've been able to help citizens in the 2nd Senatorial District with unemployment insurance during the pandemic as well.
Jermaine, you have anything else?
Oh, no. I was just making sure that if someone had concerns,
Okay.
they knew to reach out.
Senator, in closing, I got one final question. Well, most people don't know that you're also an ordained minister. Tell me a little about your ministry and how you balance that. And by the way, I hear you are a fabulous minister, and I got to stop by your church. Tell me a little bit about that.
Again, I grew up reared in church, 4th generation. From my great-grandfather to my grandmother, to my cousin to me. And I honestly believe in the midst of public service, my commitment to public service is the things that I learned in the church. I learned how to serve in the church. I learned public speaking in the church. And all of those things have benefited me in public life. I'm far from a perfect person. God knows how many mistakes, countless mistakes. But each and every day I endeavor to be better and to do what's best for the residents of the 2nd Senatorial District that I'm elected to serve. So,
When is your services?
Christ Baptist Church, website is christbaptistchurchde.com, 8 a.m. Because of COVID, all of our services are online on Facebook. So our Facebook is at Christ Baptist Church DE. And because services are online, you can literally roll out of bed at any time during the day and watch service that is broadcast at 8 a.m., 11 a.m., 3 p.m., and 6 p.m. for your convenience, because we want to be your neighborhood church.
Thank you, and I guarantee you people didn't know that.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're bringing Channel 28 DETV with a combination back to the community. I'm getting so many phone calls, the seniors, just average people in the community. Ivan even tell me that people want to come and have political forums because this is what we're doing. And we will bring you back to earth because that's what they call me, Stormy. Jermaine. And matter of fact, speaking of that, I'm going to have Jermaine sitting over here very soon, if not next week, because he's going to have to host one of these shows as we move into this political arena. And I think he's ready. He's doing a great job. Hey, Darius, thank you, buddy.
Thank you so much for having me, Storm. Jermaine, congratulations. Keep up the good work.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll be right back with Brother Butch Ingram, who's a real Kappa man and a Mason. Welcome back to Community Crossfire, another point of view. We bring the truth, uncut, because we know what the folks want. We know what you listen to, so we bring it to you live. And when I first started, I was talking to Jermaine. I'm going to let him read this book, Butch, about Willie Lynch. This takes you about 5 or 10 minutes to read it. And then you start understanding some of the problems in our community. He talked about how to control slaves, like in the 1700s, how we have black-on-black crime, and how to make light-skinned blacks against dark blacks, and people who work in DuPont against the people who are janitors, or people who are in school against people who are. I mean, it's really a fascinating book. And we have the Willie Lynches in our community, but they hide behind Facebook and all those other things, saying that they're really about black, but really killing us as blacks. So, Jermaine, once you read this, you'll see about some of the people we're talking about. Willie Lynch on it. I haven't experienced Willie Lynch. He's sitting up there as a black man, then they told him he wasn't black. And I know every time he looks in the mirror, I say, damn, ain't I black? I mean, you can't make this stuff up, Butch. How you doing, Mr. Ingram?
I'm good, sir. How you doing today?
Butch, I tell you, I'm really impressed. Butch, I'm gonna ask you, I just want to open it up. You were the principal at Bancroft, and did you fight? And I think the first black guy since Mr. Pritchett, was that right?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
So it was almost like with Darius we talked about with Herman Holloway. How was that?
How was that experience at Bancroft?
Yeah, I mean, just following the expectations of how the community. And by the way, you did a fabulous job, with you or Mr. Pritchett, or even though it's not like that, but you understand where I'm going?
Absolutely. It was some big shoes to fill.
Right.
As you know, Maurice Pritchett is a staple in the community. Everybody loved him, so they were looking to me to do those exact same things that he was doing for them, for all the years that he was there. Because I believe he was at Bancroft for about 30 years.
94. 94 years, yeah.
Yeah, so he was there for a long time. So, the expectations are always high. But he was always available there for me, like yourself, just to be able to give me some guidance and some support, just to kind of help myself throughout the community. But again, it was a wonderful experience. I really enjoyed it. It was 8 years, an amazing 8 years. The community was great. The students were great. The family was great. The families were great. Everybody was great in the community over there on the East Side.
What was it like going from Bancroft, from an elementary school, to Glasgow, a high school?
So it's a big transition, right? Because high school kids are very different. High school students are very different. The conversations are a little bit different, because you can have those tough conversations that you can't necessarily have with an elementary student who's just kind of learning what school is all about and learning what life is all about. When you get to high school, students are typically about 14 to 18, 19, depending upon where their birthday falls. So those real tough life conversations really need to be had to make sure they're on the right path and to make sure they're doing what they need to do to be successful upon graduation. So it's the same students with some of the similar issues, but they're just magnified because of the age and because of the size of the students.
Jermaine?
Yes, Principal Ingram, welcome to the show. We are in the midst of a pandemic right now. It has, stopped school short this past year. Seniors didn't get to have their dream, ending of high school. Can you give people, would you be for having students coming back for this upcoming year? And has Glasgow or the Christiana School District made an announcement on if students will return?
So all the districts in the state follow the guidance of the governor.
Okay.
So whatever he and the Secretary of Education, Delaware Secretary of Education, whatever their decisions are, kind of guide what it is that we're supposed to do in terms of schools when we do return. So right now, there hasn't been a discussion about when and if we're returning. I think that conversation will be coming within the next couple of weeks. I know the school will look very different, probably in the fall, just to ensure the safety and the security of everybody in the school. Ideally, we would like for students to come back, because we feel like obviously that one-on-one and that face-to-face and that physical contact is the best. But you also want to make sure that you're safe and you're following what those safety guidelines and restrictions are.
Yes, has Glasgow seen a withdrawal of students get, parents taking their kids out of high school due to the coronavirus pandemic, or has the enrollment stayed the same?
Our enrollment has been pretty consistent thus far, and I think the parents are probably a little anxious, just like you mentioned before, about whether or not students are going to return. So if the call is to return, I mean, there may be a likelihood that parents will decide, well, I don't think my students are ready to go back, or I don't feel safe at this time. But you'll never really know until we actually make the announcement about what we're going to do in the fall.
Okay.
Butch, let me ask you a question. So I don't know if you had a police officer in your school, but I know there's a lot of conversation now after what's going on around the country that they want to pull those out of the school. And I know you've had some issues, especially Christina School District as a whole, with their high schools with, I wouldn't say violence, but I would say violence and disruption. How do you feel about that?
So how do I feel about the SROs being in the schools?
And maybe being pulled out?
Being pulled out.
Do you think it's a need? You can say any way you want to answer.
Okay, no problem. Yeah. So there's a lot of conversation, or there has been over the past couple of weeks, a lot of conversations just around Delaware and particularly in Newcastle County about SROs and the need for SROs. I think the first thing we need to really look at is what they were sent to the schools for initially. And then they weren't there initially to control climates of schools. They were sent there initially to kind of protect the buildings from all the things that were happening across the nation. I believe at the time there were those school shootings and those types of things. And we needed somebody to be there to kind of protect the school. So that was their initial relationship or connection with the school. Since then, of course, the goal is for those officers, depending on where you sit, could be different departments. Wilmington Police Department for Wilmington, and then of course you have city for Newark, and then you have state for some of the other schools. Depending on that, the relationship was to be established with the officers and the students. So they build that relationship, they have those conversations, and they kind of ease the tension between, I guess, themselves, the community, and the officers is what the goal has been over the past few years that I've had an officer in my school. I had an officer when I was at Bancroft, and I also have one now while I'm at Glasgow High School. They are there, obviously, if issues do arise, but a lot of the governing and the governance of the school and the climate of the school is typically supposed to be handled by school administrators and officials and deans and those types of people. Now, if it becomes where a crime is committed or there is an offense that requires law enforcement, that is typically when the law officers are supposed to step in and kind of be a part of that. To pull them out, I think would be probably a little dangerous if it's drastic in terms of how to pull them out. I think that would be very dangerous because that would send a message to not only the students in the school that there is no a law enforcement presence, but it also tells the community school's wide open and we can kind of come and move as we want. Because you have to think it's not just about the students, it's about community members, it's about parents who may be upset, it could be about somebody who's just mad at the school for whatever reason or the district. You want to make sure that the students and the staff and everybody is safe. So I think that we need to make sure that we maintain that sense of security while, looking at other options if we need to. I know there was some conversation about should they be replaced with counselors. While I don't know that there's a one for the other, I think that it's more of a combination of the two because I think that students are in need of some counseling services and some additional supports due to some of the traumas that they've been involved in and exposed to at the younger ages. And now, with that, of course, the officers are there to kind of support if it gets a little bit out of hand. But I think that there should be a definite combination, and there should be a lot of conversation and thought about whether or not you drastically just remove a critical piece to the schools that has been a part of that for a number of years.
Yes, the Christina School District just implemented a new referendum. Can you give us how that affected Glasgow High School, and what are your thoughts on that?
So referendum is a touchy subject. Delaware is one of those states where all schools and all districts have to go out and vote for a referendum when there is a need. Many other states, you don't have to necessarily do that. They kind of just raise the taxes and they don't have to go out for referendums. I mean, I'm all in support of people being able to have a vote and have a say in how money is being used. So that's what the situation has been for Delaware. So for the Christina School District, we had a successful referendum in 2016. And what people saw and what people believed and what people came out in support of was that they understand that the money that was raised in 2016 doesn't go the same as it does in 2020. So for example, if you go out and buy milk in 2016 at $1.39, it's not going to be $1.39 in 2020. So we're just talking about typical increases in costs, which is why the district had to go out to the referendum. For us in Glasgow and for the district as a whole, it was important because some of the things that were at stake were music programs, sports programs for students, advanced academic programs, all those programs that traditional schools typically have and need for students to become holistically developed into those young adults that we know that they can be. So to have them removed, or to even have them in the conversation about being removed, was very scary to all of us. But it being successful really put a lot of us at ease, put the community at ease, put the students at ease, and it is now going to allow us to run a traditional school as it should be run with those supports that we've had historically.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you just tuned in, you're watching Community Crossfire, another point of view. I hope you're enjoying this segment with Butch Ingram, a very articulate young man who I think is going to some really high places. He's doing an incredible job. Hey, Butch, let me ask you a question. You guys had a lot of disruption in the Christina School District. You've had your school board chairman just step down, the president of the board. You had your superintendent in mid-season saying that he wasn't coming back. The deputy superintendent got ousted. The HR person got ousted. The finance person got ousted. It's just been like a musical chair. John Carney shut down a couple of schools. How do you keep the morale up? And I don't want you to speak for the district, but how do you keep the morale up in a district where you see so much, it looks like disarray?
So one thing that I think that we all need to understand is that the one thing that's constant in life is change, right? So this is one of those times where things had to be changed, or the thought was that things had to be changed to be able to advance forward. Just like myself, there was a change that was needed for me personally. I had to leave Bancroft and be switched to a different school because sometimes you can only take the ship so far. And then you need somebody else to come in and kind of guide that and take it to that next level. So I think that that's part of what has happened or what was going on. I think that in terms of morale, we have to just remind ourselves that it's not about what's happening above us or around us, because at the end of the day, we have a job to do to support our students 100% and give them 100% of ourselves every single day. So with that, if we keep that at the forefront and understand that that is what is supposed to happen and what's most important to all of us, then those things that happen are just things that happen. And we just have to kind of remain focused. So, but to your point, it is scary, and you sometimes wonder, well, what's the direction and what do you do and what happens next? But we know that decisions are made for most part for things for the betterment of our students and for the support of our students. So I believe that that's kind of where we are. The referendum and all those changes that you mentioned were unfortunate in some cases. People have feelings about that. But again, I think it was just about change, and everybody has to have a change at some point.
Let me ask you a final question, and I'll let Jermaine, if you want to say it's a final question before we get off the air. And this is a little bit more sensitive. You lost a young man who you watched in your school in the second grade. I remember you would call me down to this young man in the second grade, and you watched him all the way through Bayard School, and he just got hit with a bullet. I don't know the circumstances. Have you got a chance to reflect? Have you had a chance to reach out to his family? Because I know what this young man meant to you.
So yeah, that student I've actually known. So this is an interesting story. I had his mother at Christiana High School when I was the assistant principal. So
Wow.
I've known the entire family for probably about 15 years or so. So
Wow.
I had him in kindergarten all the way through fifth, and as you mentioned, through Bayard. So that's one of those things in education and in jobs where you're working with young people. It's always a tragedy when you lose
Right.
a student, and especially one as close as I believe that he and I were, and that the family were. And you kind of wonder what you could have done differently. You kind of think of how could you have better supported them or the student, but then you also have to realize that, again, things happen for whatever that reason may be, and we may not always understand that, and we have to believe that we have done our best by them in supporting them and the family to ensure, again, that they had every opportunity to be successful, because he has two brothers and a sister who also are still now in the school system and going through schools and are experiencing, some challenges and those types of things. So it takes a community effort. And so it's not just about schools, it's about all of us in the community kind of working together and supporting one another to ensure that our youth have opportunities to grow into successful adults. It's more than the school. And we have to figure out how to better support them at an early age to make sure that they make right decisions and that they're in the right environments and that they have every opportunity to be successful. So,
no, thank you for answering that question. It was just on my mind, and to tell people who are watching, I got a chance to watch Mr. Ingram in action and interacting with this young man, so it was on my mind and on my heart, because I know he took him at a young age. It had gotten to a point where Mr. Ingram had to be at the school for this young man to be there, so I knew that their bond, that relationship was something special and different. And I want to thank everyone. Jermaine, did you want to close up the?
No, we can end here. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again, and thank you, Ms. Ingram. Thank you for an incredible interview. And you sat over here, so you know how this is. And thank you for coming on the show. And ladies and gentlemen, the political campaigns are great. Gear up. People, they have until Tuesday to file, so it's going to be a lot of candidates going to be coming on the show. We're going to be endorsing candidates. We're going to be getting rid of candidates. We're going to get throwing some people out from the state, city, and county level because they watch here, and we'll be here. See ya.